This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Welcome everybody. We're so happy to have you here for this event tonight. This is the third year we've done a event about the Flying Santa, basically co-hosted by Friends of Flying Santa and the U.S. Lighthouse Society. And I'm very involved with both, so it's a real pleasure to do this tonight. The Flying Santa, of course, is a great tradition that does go back to 1929. It's still very much going strong. I'll be giving a presentation in a few minutes on the history of the flights, but for people who have never heard about it before, basically the Flying Santa tradition began as a way of showing gratitude to lighthouse keepers and their families, and it continues today primarily as a means to show appreciation to Coast Guard personnel and their families, and certainly a great cause, and we all appreciate everything the Coast Guard does for us. So it's still very important. I want to mention that the executive director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, Jeff Gales, was to be a co-host tonight, as he usually is for these events, but he texted me a while ago. He's under the weather. He's not able to be with us tonight, so he sends his regards, but he's not able to attend. We do have several very special guests, and I'm going to introduce them now. And let me say, when I introduce you special guests, you are more than welcome to unmute yourselves and say whatever pops into your heads. You're more than welcome to speak, of course. And as the event goes on, if there's something you want to comment on, I encourage you to go ahead and speak up. Just it's a very informal event here. Just unmute yourselves, say whatever you want at any point, but we will give everybody an opportunity to speak in a couple of places in the program. So first of all, I want to introduce my good friend Dolly Bicknell. Dolly is of course, is a lighthouse preservationist in her own right, longtime president of Project Gurnet and Bug Light in Massachusetts in the Plymouth area. And Dolly is on the board of the Hull Life-Saving Museum, right? Among other things. I think you're on a bunch of boards, probably. But you are also, of course, the daughter of the longtime Flying Santa, Edward Rowe Snow. And I know probably most of our people attending know who Edward Rowe Snow was, very popular historian. I'm going to be talking more about him shortly, but so glad you could be with us tonight, Dolly. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's wonderful that the Flying Santa still continues. As you said, 93 years is pretty impressive. And thank you for all your hard work, and Brian, who's your co-host,
yes,
for all his hard work too. That's
absolutely.
A segue.
Yeah. Thank you, Dolly. I'm going to introduce Brian. I'm saving him for after a couple more people. But I want to introduce Sally Snowman, who is here somewhere. Sally, I'm sure a lot of you lighthouse buffs in our audience.
Enter your meeting ID, followed by pound.
Whoops. Was that sounds coming from Sally? I'm not sure where that was coming from. So. I'm not sure where that was coming from. But anyway, if somebody has your mic unmuted, just be sure you're muted. But except for Sally. But hi, Sally and Jay. So nice to have you here tonight. And for lighthouse buffs, which most of you are, you probably know that Sally is the keeper of Boston Light, America's oldest light station. Sally is the first woman keeper in the more than 300-year history of Boston Light, and she's the only official lighthouse keeper in the United States today still employed by the federal government. Yes, that deserves some applause, absolutely. So thank you, Sally and Jay, for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for the invite. I was invited to be on the trustees of the Friends of Flying Santa in 2002. So this is my 20th year as a trustee, and I'm just so honored. The work that the Friends do, Brian, I mean, you've been fabulous. You've just been that little ever-ready buddy I should say, Santa on the background, in the background, and it's an honor to be able to be a part of the organization. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Sally. And I'm glad you said that you've been on the board of Friends of Flying Santa for 20 years. I would have invited you anyway, but that's even more of a reason for you to be with us tonight. So thank you for all the work you do in so many areas. I want to introduce Rear Admiral Dan May, who I believe is in the room somewhere.
I am, Jeremy.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Dan. We don't see you. We don't need to see you if you don't want to be seen. That's okay. That's okay. But we see your name on the screen.
My camera is not on this evening, but thanks for inviting me, and great to see all the familiar faces. I think as I shared before, I've been involved for over 30 years with Brian and the Friends, and it's just an honor to continue to be involved. As an active duty Coast Guardsman, my children got the privilege of having Santa come, and then later on in my career, I actually got to fly with Brian, which was a real thrill, and Santa delivering to all my Coast Guard stations that at the time worked under me, and to this day to be involved and part of the support for this great organization is really an honor and a privilege. So thanks for having me on tonight.
You're very welcome, Dan. And for if anybody doesn't know, Dan is retired from a long career in the Coast Guard and is an ocean engineer, has been involved in many lighthouse projects over the years, lighthouse moves and erosion control at Montauk Point Lighthouse, among many other familiar projects. Yeah.
Right,
and
Mia?
Mia Sertich is here, the director at Montauk Lighthouse. Hi, Mia. Nice to have you here tonight. So you know Dan well. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very lucky to know Dan. Thank you. And it's great to be here. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Mia, and thank you, Dan. And again, Dan and Sally and Dolly, of course, you're going to have more chances to talk as the evening goes on. And last but far from least, for special, well, you're all special guests. I don't want to leave people out because I know so many of you. But Brian, who's the co-host tonight, Brian Tague is the longtime president of Friends. Whoops, my voice is echoing back at me. Not sure where that's coming from. I don't know if everybody's hearing that. I had a loud echo for a moment there. But anyway, Brian, again, is the longtime president of Friends of Flying Santa. I've known Brian for somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 years, somewhere in that range, I'm going to say. No, you're saying no.
Too long.
What, 40 years, 50 years? No, too long? Yeah, too long. We know each other too long. So we're like bickering brothers sometimes, but I'm not sure where these sounds are coming from. They're mysterious sounds floating around here. But anyway, so thank you, Brian. Great to have you here tonight. And I know it's your busy season. How's the Flying Santa? How are the flights shaping up for this year?
So far so good. We've got all our helicopter sponsors secured. We probably have about 80% of our toys in. So we're in the process of printing out our labels, putting them on the tags, and bagging them, and they'll be redistributed to our restocking points along the routes in Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York. So it's crazy, but it's coming along as scheduled.
Yep. And the first flight is
that is Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Right. So it's just over. It's a week from today, actually. Yeah, week from today. And I'll see you at Portsmouth Harbor flight that day.
Correct. Weather permitting.
Yes, of course. It's always weather permitting, but Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse being 15 minutes from my home, very much involved with it, and always love to. It's kind of a tradition for our group there, the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, is to put up Christmas lights on the lighthouse that afternoon, and then some of us stay around for the arrival of Santa late that afternoon. So that's the plan for this coming Saturday, weather permitting. So at this point, Brian, anything you'd like to add before I go into a historical presentation? Again, you're going to have more opportunities to speak, but I don't want to cut you off if you have anything else you want to add right at the moment.
No, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so and Brian, feel completely free to jump in if I know you'll jump in if I get anything wrong in the history I'm about to tell. So I know I can count on you for that. But even if I get something right and you want to comment on it, please do. So at any point, if you want to jump in, go ahead and jump. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to give a presentation on the history of the Flying Santa. Let me.
Oh, did we want to mention briefly that Bill Wincapaw is with us?
Oh, of course. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Brian, because Bill snuck in at the last moment, and I wasn't sure if he was going to be here. I'm so glad you said that. Bill Wincapaw III is with us. Bill, if you're hearing me, can you unmute yourself?
I think I am muted. Am I unmuted now?
You are. There you are. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Bill. I'm so glad you can make it.
Sorry for the late arrival. We got back from a birthday party. I didn't think we were going to make it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fantastic. It's great to have you here. Bill is the grandson of the original Flying Santa, which I'm going to talk about right now. And actually there's a couple of pictures of you in the presentation. So, yeah, so good to have you here. Yeah. And it's a great family legacy you have, both in terms of Flying Santa and just aviation and all that. It's fantastic. So again, if you at any point during the event tonight, Bill, if you have something you want to add, by all means, feel free.
All right, I'll figure out how to do all this here. It's my first time doing this.
Well, you're doing just great. You're doing fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go into share screen here, and you should be seeing my screen, and I'm going to try to get rid of these controls at the top. There. Now, my presentation should be filling up your screens, I hope. Brian, can you confirm that?
Yes, it is, sure. Okay,
good. All right. So you see these video clips here are relatively recent that are playing. These were actually taken, the two clips with Santa there. The actual video clips are from when I flew along on the Massachusetts flight in 2012. That was pretty amazing. And then you see the helicopter passing, saw it passing Portsmouth Harbor Light there on the left. So I'm going to get into our crash course on the 93-year history of the Flying Santa here. And we're going to start at the beginning, the Wincapaw years, starting in 1929. And this is Captain William H. Wincapaw. And by the way, let me just pause for a second just to say, if this is our third time doing this, and I've given some version of this talk each year, but I've added some special things. I've actually kind of spruced up the presentation this year. So anybody who's seen it before, you're going to see some new things tonight. So this is Captain William H. Wincapaw, aviator, adventurer, and founder of the Flying Santa program. Born in 1885, he was a native of Friendship, Maine, which is in the mid-coast. And he actually was nicknamed Captain Wincapaw before he ever flew a plane, because he also sailed various kinds of vessels, coasting vessels and yachts, and that's why he was called captain. He started flying in 1911. He was a civilian flying instructor during World War I, and then he started flying seaplanes out of New York. He returned to Maine, started the Maine Air Transport Company in Rockland in the mid-coast, and supervised the construction of a seaplane ramp in Rockland Harbor. He flew mostly amphibious planes. I don't know why every time somebody comes in the waiting room, I guess the controls pop back up at the top. So I'm going to try to keep them out of the way there. But he flew mostly amphibious airplanes, as you can see here. I think this particular plane is a 1928 Ireland amphiplane, Brian tells me. And he, as you see from the newspaper article on the right there, he often flew sick and injured islanders in the Penobscot Bay region to medical facilities. Near the end of this, on the right there in this article, it talks about how he knew the great risk of facing a 50-mile gale, et cetera, when somebody had been injured in a bad accident, or that an emergency operation must be performed, et cetera. So he certainly saved some lives flying people around the Penobscot Bay region in extreme circumstances. By 1929, Captain Wincapaw was overseeing operations of the Curtiss Flying Service at the Rockland Airfield, as well as a nearby seaplane base. And at night and in bad weather, he often relied on lighthouses to help him get to his destinations. The lighthouse keepers would watch for him to pass. They would sometimes relay word to the airfield that he was on the way. He got to know many of the keepers personally, and he would visit them when he could. And to show his appreciation for these lighthouse keepers and their families, on Christmas Day, 1929, he loaded his plane with about a dozen packages containing newspapers, magazines, coffee, candy, and other items. He dropped the packages at the lighthouses in the Rockland area as a gesture of gratitude to the keepers and their families. So that was the beginning of the Flying Santa program. The flights got a great reaction from the keepers. He expanded them in the following years to more of the Maine coast and the other New England states. This is a clip from 1930 with one of the early planes that was used. This clipping from the Portland Press Herald mentions that the packages that year contained the morning's copy of the Portland Press Herald. And here's an article from the Boston Globe, and this mentions that the Boston Globe was also included in the packages. And this article mentions towards the end the names of the lighthouses that he visited that year, which were pretty much in the Penobscot Bay region, going as far south as Marshall Point Lighthouse in Port Clyde. Bill Wincapaw Jr., who you see on the left here, started flying with his father when he was 4 years old and was at the controls of planes by the time he was 11 years old. And a little bit later, he became the youngest licensed pilot in the state of Massachusetts. I'll talk more about that in a little while. But he was another great aviator in his own right. So the keeper on the right here was Arthur Mitchell with his wife at Fort Point Light in Stockton Springs, Maine. They're in front of the fog bell there. This is a 1932 article, this Guardians of the Coast thing. And it quotes Keeper Mitchell at Fort Point. He said, quote, "We thank you for remembering us again this year." Flying Santa, that is, of course. "The bundles of papers and magazines landed very near our mailbox. Our dog was the first to hear the sound of the motor, and then we all rushed out in time to see the plane circle over the reservation and go sailing down the Penobscot again," unquote. So here's Captain Wincapaw and Bill Jr. On the left, loading up. That picture was from 1936, and there's a picture from around that time of the plane passing over Boston Light. The Wincapaws moved to Winthrop, Massachusetts in 1933, Winthrop being just north of Boston, basically a peninsula on Boston Harbor. Their flights by then went to as many as 91 lighthouses and Coast Guard stations. Bill Jr. helped out on the flights in 1934. Bill Jr. became the youngest licensed pilot in Massachusetts at the age of 17. He flew some of the route that Christmas, flew on his own to some of the lighthouses the following year. You notice that in a lot of these pictures, you see La Touraine coffee on the plane. That was a company, part of the family of companies under the W.S. Quinby Company of Boston. The Quinby Company was a longtime sponsor of the Flying Santa flights. So that's why you see La Touraine on the planes for some of those early years. Here is Captain Wincapaw at the controls and Bill Jr. demonstrating his bombardiering technique in 1936. And I love this photo. This is Captain Wincapaw and Bill Jr. In the 1930s, photo by Alton Hall Blackington, who was a newspaper columnist and author, and I believe a radio personality, and also obviously an excellent photographer. It looks like something out of a 30s movie like Casablanca or something. It's a great picture. Here's Captain Wincapaw flying past Boston Light again. This is 1936.
37. Yeah.
37, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, as I said 36, I was thinking that's not the same plane as in the other picture, so, right?
Yeah, the Fokker was 1937, and the Stinson was 36, and the Belanca Airbus was 35.
Okay. Well, I'm far from an aircraft expert, so I'm glad we have.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. No,
yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'm
The
glad we have.
Belanca had crashed behind the Queen Mary So there wasn't a plane available
Oh.
in 35. They had to use the Stinson.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad we have you and Brian, who know a lot more about aircraft than I do. That's for sure. And I think this is which I have this as 37. Do you think that's right? Is it?
Yeah, it's the Fokker Trimotor. Bickford's donated it that year for the flight.
Okay. And Bickford's being another one of the family of companies under the Quinby Company, Bickford's Restaurants, as I understand it, right? Yeah, I don't know if Bickford's Restaurants still exist, but
Oh, yeah.
do
Well,
they? Not around here.
even when
They
I
just-
was up there, let's okay.
Okay. Well, this is the plane flying over Graves Light in outer Boston Harbor. I think it's one of the all-time great Flying Santa pictures. And here again is Captain Wincapaw and Bill Jr., your dad, Bill. And the picture on the right shows them with some, I guess, elves who helped with the packages that year. Of course, the Bickford's plane, loading up the Bickford's plane, circa 37, I guess that would be.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to move on to the Edward Rowe Snow years, but there is some overlap here between the Wincapaw years and the Edward Rowe Snow years. Edward Rowe Snow, this picture was taken, I think, in 1939. He was born in Winthrop, Mass. in 1902. Later lived in Marshfield on the South Shore. He became one of the most popular historians and storytellers of the New England coast. He wrote about 40 full-length books on maritime history and many shorter ones, over 100 in all, depending on which list you look at. I've seen as many as 150 or so titles. His first book in 1935 was The Islands of Boston Harbor. He wrote about all kinds of maritime stories, shipwrecks, pirates, treasure, maritime storms, et cetera, just all the things that make the New England coast so interesting. Wrote about other places too, but New England was really his focus of much of his writing. Over the years, when he was involved with the Flying Santa, he usually included his latest book in the Santa packages. He was teaching history at Winthrop High School in the 1930s. Bill Wincapaw Jr. had him as a teacher. And of course, Edward Rowe Snow, being interested in lighthouses, became extremely interested in the Santa flights, and he got involved. In 1936, he flew with Bill Jr. to 25 stops, while Bill Sr. flew the northern route. A newspaper article said that year the packages weighed 16 pounds each. Coffee, cookies, silk hose, magazines, almanacs, candy, cigarettes, and a book were among the things included. This is Graves Light again in outer Boston Harbor, I believe 1938. And in 1938, Bill Wincapaw Sr. flew to Bolivia to fly gold and mining equipment. And Edward Rowe Snow made the flights with Bill Jr. I believe Bill Jr. Also went to Bolivia for a while. Is that right, Bill?
He did in 39. I believe you went with him. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as you see from the headline here, Edward Rowe Snow flew as Santa in 1938 with Wincapaw being gone. And I should mention that Edward Rowe Snow was never a pilot. He, when he was Santa, he would always hire a plane and pilot at his own expense. So just to make it clear, he was not a pilot. Bill Wincapaw Sr. came back from South America to play Santa in 1939. And I love this picture. He looks like Einstein or something. It looks like he's wearing the Santa wig, but not a beard, or maybe he's wearing the beard on his head. I'm not quite sure, but it's a great picture. And so he returned to 39 and shared the flights. And on the right is the plane passing Boston Light. And I believe that's from that same year. And here's a great picture of Edward Rowe Snow and his wife, Anna Merle. Anna Merle flew for the first time in 1940, flew with her husband just about every year after that. She was quite a trooper. She sometimes would wear her own version of the Santa suit as well, but not in this picture. So this is from 1940. This is 10 Pound Island. I want to get rid of these controls again. This is 10 Pound Island in Gloucester Harbor, Massachusetts. Edward Hopkins became keeper at 10 Pound Island in 1922, and he was still there in 1940. And on that year, when Edward Rowe Snow was going to be flying over as the Flying Santa, the keeper's wife, Hopkins' wife, the story goes that he was reading a magazine by the stove, and she went to him and said, "Oh, we got to do something special for the Flying Santa." And he kind of harumphed at her and wasn't interested. So she went out on her own and nailed newspapers to the ground to spell out Merry Christmas. And when Edward Rowe Snow flew over, he took these pictures. And he later that day, he got a picture to the that you see on the right there, to the Associated Press. It was distributed to many newspapers. I think it was in the morning papers the next day. And the keeper Hopkins' son bought a Boston paper on the mainland, brought it back to 10-Pound Island. And I guess his dad, the keeper, was quite flabbergasted to see his lighthouse on the front page of the paper, just I don't know, 12 hours or so after the picture had been taken. The flights were cut back during World War II. Edward Rowe Snow was in the Army Air Corps. He was a reconnaissance photographer. He was wounded in North Africa. Bill Jr. served in the Navy, and Bill Sr. became the chief of maintenance at the Quonset Naval Air Station in Rhode Island. The flights resumed in 1943, as you can see from this clipping. Okay, and this leads us to one of the all-time famous and most heartwarming stories of the Flying Santa. This is Simond Ponsart. She's now Simond Ponsart Roberts. She's about 4 years old in this picture with one of the dogs that she had at the lighthouses when she was a girl. And she was the daughter of the keeper at Cuttyhunk Lighthouse, which is Cuttyhunk is an island at the end of the chain called the Elizabeth Islands off of Cape Cod, extending out from Falmouth. And the lighthouse is no longer there. Her father was the last keeper of that lighthouse before it was destroyed. And she asked if the Flying Santa could drop a doll especially for her. And we're going to get a little more detail on this in a moment in something that's actually been written for us by Simond. But the sad part of the story is that the package with the doll in it hit a rock on Cuttyhunk Island, and the doll was broken. But we'll get more into that in a moment. But because of what happened, the first helicopter trip Flying Santa ever made was done the following year, specifically so that Edward Rowe Snow, the Flying Santa, could hand a new doll to Simond Ponsart. By that time, the family had moved to West Chop Light on Martha's Vineyard. And at this point, I want to get some more detail by actually hearing a letter that Simond has provided to us. Let me come out of screen sharing here. All right. And Dolly, how would you like to read to us for a minute here? Our good friend Simond has provided a beautiful letter for us to read. And Dolly, you're elected to read Simond's account of what happened back then. So you can go ahead.
Okay, bear with me. Hello, I'm an 82-year-old kid, one of the ones who, under Ed Snow's regime of being Flying Santa, got really treated royally. I'm the kid who used to live at Cuttyhunk Lighthouse, and when I was very little, my mother told me that because we lived at a lighthouse, a very special Santa Claus would fly over our lighthouse, not with reindeer, but in a plane. And like the war bombers of World War II, he was going to circle our lighthouse and drop us presents. All I heard was drop me presents. And I asked Mom if maybe a doll could be dropped for me. As all good mothers would, she said, "We will see." Well, Mom found out about Mr. Snow because she had read about him in a newspaper. And so correspondence was exchanged, and we were on the list. I am sure he read it over and checked it twice, and must have found out that I'd been not too naughty and had been mostly nice. Because come that day, meanwhile, I had thought every plane going over the light all the way from October to that day was him. Well, anyway, come that day, there he was. He circled and bombardired 3 packages, big, heavy packages. One fell into the pond and had to be saved from sinking as soon as possible, but one, yep, the big one for me, hit one of those giant granite rocks there. And inside it, as well as all the wonderful stuff for the lighthouse keepers, well, there was my doll, and it was broken. As the story has been retold, the God's honest truth, I cried myself to sleep that night. Dad, being a resourceful lighthouse keeper, all of them were, repaired my doll, wired it back together, and put a sling on her, and she was my sick dolly. The parents wrote Mr. Snow. He said something like, my, this will not do. Next year, I'm going to do better. The next year, our lighthouse was to be torn down, and we all cried when we left it. We moved over. Oops. We moved over to the next island. You've heard of it, Martha's Vineyard. Well, what do you know? What do you know happened? Mr. Snow, out of his own money, I understand, and cost a lot of bucks too, rented a helicopter and landed there at the Coast Guard station. And oh my goodness, here was that flying Santa handing me a replacement doll. It was one of the greatest moments in my whole life. I remember it like yesterday, and my heart still trembles thinking of it. So I quickly took the doll from him and thanked him. My mother had schooled me in that sort of thing, and I was in a living dream. All the years after that time, and he always gave me a present. While I remember it clearly, Jeremy, can you show a little film clip of it happening? That kid in the Red Riding Hood coat, that's me. And look at that doll he handed me. Yep, living a dream. She did a great job. Oh, I can't hear you.
That's because I muted myself.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so you wouldn't hear me breathing while you were speaking. Thank you so much for reading that, Dolly. I'm sorry Simon can't be with us tonight, but I know she'll be honored that you read her letter.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
That's perfect. And we've got a little bit more to hear from Simon later. But just to mention quickly, there's a book called Everyday Heroes, The True Story of a Lighthouse Family, that I helped put together with Simon's memoirs of her years growing up at lighthouses at Cuddy Hunk and West Chop. And I think it came out very nicely, and that is available from the Friends of Flying Santa website. And also a children's book called Love from the Sky that's about the story we're talking about. That is also available. And we'll say a little bit more about that before the event is over. But I'm going to go back to screen share, and I'm going to show you the video that she's talking about. Okay. It gets confusing doing Zoom and Keynote at the same time. All right. So here is the video clip showing the helicopter. You're going to see it fly over Martha's Vineyard, and you'll see West Chop Lighthouse in Vineyard Haven on Martha's Vineyard, where Simond and her father, Keeper Octave Ponsart, and her mother Emma lived. There's a shot of a half a second of a ferry there. There's West Chop Lighthouse, and the helicopter actually landed here it is at the life-saving station at Gay Head on the west end of the island, and there is Santa handing Simond her new doll, and that's one of the all-time classic moments in Flying Santa history right there, and a central moment emotionally for Simond in her life. And obviously she can't say enough good about the Flying Santa. There's West Chop again. There's the life-saving station, and there's Gay Head Lighthouse. All right, and here is another clip, another version. I guess there must have been 2 cameras running that day of him handing the doll to Simond. I just rediscovered that clip last night when I was working on this in a TV show. The Chronicle TV show in Boston did a show on Edward Rowe Snow, and that was in that show. And of course, a great picture there of, again, next to Simond with the hat on, the keeper's hat, that's her father, Octave Ponsart, the keeper of Cuttyhunk Lighthouse, and Edward Rowe Snow, and Simond's mother, Emma, and I'm not sure who the Coast Guard couple on the far left is with the baby. So here is Bill Wincapaw Sr. again. In 1946, the Wincapaws flew the northern route and the Snows flew the southern route. Bill Jr. was the pilot and his father was the bombardier that year. On July 16th, 1947, Bill Wincapaw suffered a heart attack shortly after taking off from Rockland Harbor. His Cub cruiser seaplane plunged into the harbor, and he and his 20-year-old passenger both died, and Wincapaw was just 61. A memorial service was attended by lighthouse keepers, their families, island residents, and representatives of the Coast Guard, Army, and Navy. At 2 o'clock, as the service began, foghorns and bells were sounded all over the Penobscot Bay area in his memory. So here is Boston Light, 1947, and Edward Rowe Snow became the sole flying Santa at that point. During his Maine flight as Santa in 1947, he dropped a wreath in Rockland Harbor in memory of Captain Wincapaw, and that year he visited 176 lighthouses from Canada to Florida. New England was always the heart of the tradition, but he would sometimes fly to the Great Lakes. I think at least 1 or 2 occasions flew to the West Coast, occasionally to Florida, to Bermuda, to Atlantic Canada. So the flights did go beyond New England quite a few times. Here is Edward Rowe Snow and Anna Merle and Dolly in the basement of their Marshfield home somewhere in the 1950s. And maybe Dolly can say a little bit more about this in a while, but I understand the basement was Flying Santa Central in the weeks leading up to Christmas. But we'll come back to that Dolly. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. And here's another great photo of the Snows at the plane. I'm gonna guess maybe 1960-ish, somewhere around there. And I'm gonna play a clip from a show, a news clip from CBS News, 1985. I'm sure a lot of you remember Charles Kuralt on CBS News. Used to do Charles Kuralt on the road. And I'm gonna play part of that segment. I'm actually going to play, usually I've included a little bit of Dolly in these presentations from that clip, but this is a little bit longer, and you're going to see some of Anna Merle as well in this clip.
Daughter Dorothy will never forget the thrill.
You know, it would just be very windy and noisy, and you'd go along and you'd see him go right out the window like that, and then again. And then he'd say, they got it, they got it. And he'd be so excited. And my mother would say, now, Edward, don't lose your hat. Come back in here.
Thank you for the things you sent down. I wish I could have seen the package fall.
Anna Merle Snow has kept all the letters from Halfway Rock and Monhegan, Cuttyhunk and Nantucket, from children in lonely places.
I saw you drop the package over Eastern Point Light, and I was the one who got it. I bet you make a lot of children happy. I am 14, and even I enjoyed it.
Mrs. Snow remembers watching the young bride of the lightkeeper at remote Gurnet Light off Plymouth.
She was out there, and it was her first year married, and she was so lonesome. And when she saw the plane coming, she ran out and she danced up and down. And then when the package landed, you could see her feet going. She was running as fast as she could to get it. And she held it up way over her head, and you could just feel the joy that she had at that lighthouse. It really was very nice. And it made us feel good too, you know.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you a few postcards here. Let me get rid of this again. Edward Rowe Snow always included a self-addressed postcard in the packages so that the keepers could send the postcard to him to let him know they received the packages. And this is one example of that. This is from Matinicus Rock Light Station, which is more than 20 miles off of Midcoast, Maine. From Jacko Berry, Matinicus Rock. We've received your package. I sure was glad to find it. Not only did it make me feel that Christmas was here, but it gave me the feeling that we here on the Eastern Coast lighthouses were not being forgotten. Makes me feel happy to know there is still some kind people left in this crazy world today. I'm sure you were one of the most kindest of them all. I thank you so much for the package. Wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And, you know, especially at these really isolated stations, it really made their Christmas to have this this attention from Flying Santa. This is Mount Desert Rock, another extremely isolated lighthouse, more than 20 miles off the coast, from Ralph Demmons, who was the officer in charge for the Coast Guard. For people who don't know, I should make the point that lighthouse keepers were civilian employees of the federal government until 1939, when the Coast Guard took over management of lighthouses. So, and then most of them were automated by about 1990. But from 39 to 90, most of the keepers were Coast Guard personnel. Ralph Demmons wrote, "We received this package, rather found it today, February 22nd, in a crevice between the rocks, dried it out, and nearly everything in it was usable and readable. Thanks. Thought you might be interested to know that someone did a real job of packing for this package to withstand the elements and seas breaking over it for so long a time." And this one is from Ozzie Hallett at Race Point Light at the tip of Cape Cod in Provincetown. That is him on the far left in this picture. He was a longtime lighthouse keeper at various places. He was at Race Point for a number of years. This is 1946. I've received your package, found your package today about a mile northeast of here. One of the keepers taking a shortcut with the Jeep came upon it. It was pretty well wet and frozen, but we were drying out the books and they will be okay. Thanks. And here's one from my local lighthouse here, Portsmouth Harbor Light. And the Coast Guard moved into their station there in Newcastle, right next to the lighthouse, right about that time in 1948. The station had been offshore on Wood Island in the harbor. So this is right after that area became the official Coast Guard station for the harbor, and the last official lighthouse keeper left there in 1948. This is from Jordan Orr, the officer in charge. And just trying to get rid of these controls out of the way here. He says the package is in very good condition, December 23rd, 1948. Many thanks. It was a good shot, landed right beside the light tower. In behalf of the men here and myself, I want to thank you again for thinking of us at this time. Wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And this is from the Scituate Coast Guard Station, Massachusetts. This is Scituate Lighthouse. The Coast Guard station is near there, but it's not right at the lighthouse. But this is from Emil Carey, the officer in charge of the Scituate Coast Guard Station. We have received the package that you sent on December 22nd, 67. The crew and myself, thank you very much. The station's dogs, Caesar and Wimpy, also wish to thank you for the Gainsburgers you sent them. So animals were often remembered in these packages as well. And there were dogs at a lot of the Coast Guard stations and lighthouses. And this has a really interesting story behind it. This is Whaleback Lighthouse with the old fog signal tower next to it that was removed in the 1960s. But Whaleback is the southernmost lighthouse in Maine. It's right near the border with New Hampshire, the mouth of the Piscataqua River. In December 1948, Edward Rowe Snow dropped a bundle from a plane for the keepers at Whaleback. The first drop was too far for them to recover, and it floated away. 3 weeks later, a man walking on a beach in Sandwich on Cape Cod found the package 90 miles from where it had been dropped. Years later, the man still had the book that was in the package, which was Edward Rowe Snow's Storms and Shipwrecks of New England. And that is the card from the guy who found it, E.S. Clark, and that's all was left of it. And that's Edward Rowe Snow's writing on there, please be careful, this floated 90 miles.
Jeremy, also, he called it his most outstanding failure.
I love that. I don't think I remember hearing that before. Oh, that's great.
But if you look carefully, I mean, people who are just looking, that's all that's left of the card itself. It's on another card.
I just want to mention some blue lines just showed up on the right side of the picture. I saw Pat Krasnowski's name there. Pat, if you could be careful, there's some, I don't even know how you do this, but there's some way that users can write on the screen, and I think you accidentally did that. So no problem, but try not to go any further
do
into
it
the
again.
picture there. Yeah, it's happened to me before. I had somebody draw lines right in the middle of the picture and almost obliterate my presentation at one point. I wish I knew how to prevent it, but I don't. Okay, this is Sankaty Headlight on Nantucket, circa 1950s. And Boston Light, 1958, Coast Guard keeper holding up the package over his head there. And often, again, they would spell out greetings in various ways with sticks or rocks or newspapers. And obviously, if there was snow on the ground, it was easier to spell out a greeting in the snow. But if there was no snow, you had to be creative.
Hey, let Billy know on a Zoom meeting,
Whoop, somebody needs to mute themselves there. Thank you. This is 1959 newsreel, Hearst newsreel about the Flying Santa. It's very short. Let me just play this.
'Twas the day before Christmas when the New England coast awaited Ed Snow, who was taking his post as the Santa he'd played for 25 years, each and every December as Yuletide came near.
Sorry, the music got cut off there at the end. And a great picture of the Snow family, again, probably sometime in the 1950s.
You can tell I'm thrilled.
You look a little more happy here, actually.
Yes, I learned how to smile. Did you see it says to the children of Cuttyhunk?
So it does. Yeah. So this would be probably early, well, children of Cuttyhunk. So there was no lighthouse there anymore, but I guess there was still a delivery to, I don't know if you landed there or just dropped. Well, obviously you dropped them.
We dropped, and that was, you know, he used to write on them S for stag, D for doll, and that was a special one. Maybe there were people meeting us at an airport or something.
Okay, so that's post Lighthouse at Cuttyhunk, but still special delivery for people there. Yeah, and I guess this is probably into the 1960s here by this time, probably mid 60s we're looking at, I'd say. Yeah, somewhere around there. And speaking of mid 60s, this is from 1967, and on occasion there's Dolly, and this is Boston Light. On occasion, Mr. Snow would visit Boston Light by boat in the Christmas season, is what's happening here. That guy right there, I'm sure a lot of you here know who he was. This is Ken Black. He's on the left now. Ken Black was known as Mr. Lighthouse. He was the officer in charge for the Coast Guard of various stations around New England, this time at Point Allerton in Boston Harbor and Hull. That is the keeper at Boston Light at the time, Bill Michelonis. And some of the long line of Boston Light dogs on the wharf there as well. Just a neat scene seeing Ken Black. Ken Black is actually mentioned in a couple of Edward Rowe Snow's books, and I think helped him get around to some of his destinations in the Boston Harbor area and various places around that time. And there's Ken again. He basically the founder of the Maine Lighthouse Museum in Rockland. He saved many lenses and artifacts from destruction and ended up being the basis of the Maine Lighthouse Museum. Here is Edward Rowe Snow about to throw a package at Sankaty Headlight on Nantucket, and you see that plexiglass window being held open by his wife behind him, Anna Merle. It's her hand there holding it open. This window was made specially, custom made for the Flying Santa. And the actual window was stored somewhere and was given to me at a lecture I did some years ago, and it's now in the Flying Santa archives. So we actually have the plexiglass window you see here. And this is, I'm not sure, Brian or Bill can probably say what kind of plane he's in here. I think it was one of the larger planes used for the Flying Santa flights. PBY Catalina, okay. And I'm going to play you an audio clip here. It's pretty short, but it's from a radio show called Contact with Bob Kennedy in the 1960s. Let me go ahead and play this.
It's a rather cold, kind of snowy morning here at Norwood Airport, and the gentleman standing next to me looks like Santa Claus. In fact, kind of a special Santa Claus, a flying Santa Claus. And as I look a little closer, kind of looks like a fellow we know very well here on Contact, Ed Rowe Snow. How are you, Ed? And kind of a little early Merry Christmas to you.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm feeling pretty good, and Merry Christmas to you, Bob.
Ed Rowe Snow, I thought you mainly stayed aboard or near the sea. How come the airplane and how come the Flying Santa Claus?
Well, we fly out over the sea in this plane, and we will leave in just a few moments. We will cover about 1,600 miles today and go down into Maryland as our greatest objective of the day. Also, we will stop at Martha's Vineyard. We will stop at Nantucket Island. We will stop at Block Island. And meanwhile, as we go to and from those various airports, we will drop from our plane about 112 bundles.
Ed Snow, how long have you been the Flying Santa?
My first year was 1936, and I've been doing it every year except one when I was in the North African invasion. So this will be the 27th trip.
I apologize if the sound is a little soft. Zoom and doing presentations on Zoom is kind of mysterious sometimes. The volume on that was quite loud when I practiced it and seems soft now, and I couldn't get it any louder, but I hope you could all hear it. This is from 1980, WCVB Channel 5 in Boston, from a news report. Just a quick clip of Edward Rowe Snow talking about what was in the packages here.
In the old days, we had cigars, cigarette, candy, chewing gum, pen and pencil sets, a doll, if there are kids in the family, and a copy of my latest book, which is now my 96th book.
Again, I hope you could hear that. Okay, and here's one more quick clip from that same news report of Edward Rowe Snow explaining why he stopped wearing a beard as the Flying Santa.
It has cost us over $100 every time I stick my head out of the window. Goes the beard.
Okay, and here's a picture circa 1970s of Edward and Anna Merle. Edward Rowe Snow suffered a stroke in 1981. He was not able to fly that year. Judith Van Ham, the director of the Hull Life-Saving Museum, which is an old life-saving station in Hull on the South Shore of Boston, she approached Anna Merle Snow and asked if she would mind if the museum carried out that year's flights. She very happily agreed. The museum had about a month to pull the flights together. 3 helicopters were provided by different donors. And in the ceremony you see here at Logan Airport, Edward Rowe Snow's Santa suit and hat were presented to Ed McCabe of the museum. And Ed was the museum's first flying Santa. Here he is with the pilot and helicopter. That year, they flew to over 20 lighthouses from West Quoddy Head at the easternmost tip of Maine down to Rhode Island. And there's a funny story about Ed McCabe's beard. Obviously, you don't expect Santa to have a black beard, so the kids were kind of surprised by that. They would ask why Santa's beard was black, and they were always told that Santa's beard doesn't turn white till Christmas Eve. Edward Rowe Snow passed away in 1982. The museum carried on the flights for a number of years after that. This is Chatham Light on Cape Cod. Brian Tague became involved in 1991, and a bunch of the photos and the rest of this presentation were taken by him. Brian became the official Flying Santa photographer. The flights were cut back to about 15 lighthouses in the 80s. The lights were being automated at that time. But in the years since then, they've been expanded to visit more Coast Guard stations and occasionally to lighthouses that are managed by civilian organizations. This is Annisquam Light in Gloucester. You see the welcome spelled out in the snow there. Used to be a Coast Guard family living there after automation. This is Boston Light. Nopska Light, Woods Hole in Cape Cod. Now managed by an excellent friends group. They're making a museum, turning the house into a museum. Warwick Light in Rhode Island. I believe our friend Dan May was there at Civil Engineering Unit Providence. Maybe he's in this picture, one of the people on the ground there. And Montauk Point Light, New York, which occasionally was a stop, not in more recent years, but Montauk was a destination for Santa some years. Moving on, the Hull Lifesaving Museum has many different missions, and it was just decided that it would be better to form a separate nonprofit organization. Friends of Flying Santa was formed in '97. This is a great picture of the helicopter, Santa helicopter, passing Portland Headlight in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. This was adapted into the Flying Santa logo. You can also see Ram Island Ledge Lighthouse in the distance there. This is Santa Dave Waldrop at Annisquam Light. He is a retired Coast Guard warrant officer, first flew as Santa in '94, and he flew a number of years after that, minus a tour of duty in Alaska, and also longtime board member of the group. And this is retired Chief Warrant Officer Tom Guthline of the Coast Guard, first flew in '97. He was the executive petty officer at Station Gloucester, and he was living at Annisquam Light and got to know about the Flying Santa firsthand and decided to become involved. And he has flown as Santa many times, is a board member as well. And this is another retired Coast Guard officer and board member, Dave Considine. And in these pictures, he's been Santa for some of the regular flights, but he also played Santa at George's Island at Boston Harbor in August. That's what you're seeing here during one of the annual Edward Rowe Snow days that used to be held there. And on the left there is with our good friend John Forbes, the late John Forbes, who was a great volunteer for the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands. On the upper right is the memorial for Edward Rowe Snow on George's Island with Brian Tague and Dolly Bicknell and Santa. And another family picture of the Snow clan on the bottom there, but I should say Bicknell clan, Snow Bicknell clan. And in the middle with the red shirt next to Santa is Evan Weil, who's the owner of that helicopter and pilot, and has actually donated his piloting service and his helicopter some years for Flying Santa. This is Santa Bill Donahue, another retired Coast Guard officer, has been Santa a number of times in recent years. And this is Santa John Roberts, another retired Coast Guard officer. I knew him when he was officer in charge at Station Portsmouth Harbor, close to me here, and he has been Santa a number of times in recent years. That's a great picture. This is Dale Hardy, was a pilot for Santa for about a decade, more than a decade. And this is at Highland Light with Santa Dave Waldrop. And I've flown with Dale a couple of times, not on the Santa flights, but on other occasions. He's a great guy, great pilot. And so many companies, and I'm hoping Brian can say a little bit more about this in a little while, but many companies have donated the helicopters and pilots for the flights over the years. JBI Helicopters, Tuckamore Aviation, Heliops, Boston Executive Helicopters, various private owners, and so forth. And this is Lorraine Todd and Art Gojikian, Fisher Scientific flight crew, and Lorraine is playing the role of Rudolph there, but they took part for some years. And when there's time, the kids get to get a little tour of Santa's sleigh. There's always a schedule to stick to, but again, if there's time, they get to get inside the helicopter. In 2003, Simond Ponsart came up from Louisiana to fly along as an elf on the Massachusetts flight, and I took the ferry out to Martha's Vineyard and met the group at the West Chop Lighthouse, where Simond lived for about 10 years as a young girl and teenager. She used to get the assistant keeper mad at her because she would bring her record player into the lighthouse and play her Elvis records in the lighthouse. But anyway, so she had such a great time being an elf for Santa that day at her old home. It was just a great day. And that same day, they landed at Plymouth Light or Gurnet Light, where Dolly is very involved. And even though Simond had corresponded with the Snow family over the years, for many years, Dolly, I believe this was the first time you and Simond actually met in person. So that was pretty neat. And on the right is Brian and Simond and Dolly. So that was a really nice event there. And the older woman in these pictures is Connie Small. Connie was a wonderful person who wrote a classic book called The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife when she was 85 years old. She lived to be 103. She passed away in 2005. But picture on the left is her with Sally Snowman when I visited with Sally at the home where Connie was living in Portsmouth at that time. And on the right is at the cafeteria or mess at Coast Guard Station, Portsmouth Harbor. There's Bill Wincapaw III, who's here with us tonight, and Connie Small and Santa, of course. And Connie knew Bill Wincapaw I, the original Flying Santa. She remembered all that well. So it was fun for her to be there for the arrival of Santa that day and to meet the grandson of the original Flying Santa. This is a 75th anniversary celebration we had in 2004 at the Coast Guard Station in Boston. And that's Laurie Newmeyer, the director of the Hull Lifesaving Museum on the left there, and Ed McCabe in the middle. My voice is echoing back at me again for some reason. I don't know if other people are hearing that. I'm hearing an echo. No, it seems to be going away again. Anyway, that's Ed McCabe there, and you can see his beard turned the proper color for Santa by that time, and he actually did fly 1 year recently as Santa for one of the flights, and that is Admiral Dave Pekoski, who was the in charge of the first Coast Guard district at that time. And you see some of the board and pilots and Admiral Pekoski in the top picture. That plaque honoring Captain Wincapaw was unveiled at that event. And it was unveiled again at the Maine Lighthouse Museum. And there's Ken Black again, Mr. Lighthouse, and Bill Wincapaw III. And it is part of a Flying Santa exhibit at the Maine Lighthouse Museum in Rockland. Brian Tague was given an award by the Coast Guard. I forget exactly what year this was, 10-ish years ago. And that next to him with the blue uniform is John Roberts, who has been Santa in recent years, but was the officer in charge of Portsmouth Harbor at that time. And Brian was recognized by the Coast Guard for all the great work he's done, keeping this wonderful tradition alive. And I'm going to play a brief clip here. This is just a minute or two. This is when I flew along with Santa in 2012. This is the station Cape Cod Canal. Just give you an idea of what it's like being at one of these stops. Okay, I love the way often babies will look at Santa like they don't know what to make of it. But it was great being along on the flight that day. So I'm going to play one final video clip here. It's a couple of minutes. It's from website ctnow.com in Connecticut. And it was from, what year was this from, Brian? It was several years ago. But it's a really good summing up of the Santa flights. I believe. What was that, Brian?
2011.
Okay, so about 10 or 11 years ago, but this is at Stratford Point Light in Connecticut. I'll go ahead and play this.
The sound is glittering as little children wait patiently, breathlessly anticipating the arrival of a Yuletide legend. And then, in a flash, he appears out of the clouds and zooms past Stratford Point Lighthouse.
It was unbelievable. My son was so excited to see the chopper come in with Santa Claus.
Forget Dasher and Dancer, good old Saint Nick is flying in style aboard a very small and agile helicopter.
It was pretty cool how they circled around, and you know, the kids just went nuts. They loved it.
From his high-tech sleigh, he can see welcoming waves and big smiles. So he descends as the breeze blows like crazy, creating flurries of gleeful excitement.
Windy, it looked like a tornado.
After a year of being nice, not naughty, the kids see flying Santa step out of the chopper, ready to make their Christmas dreams come true.
Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane.
This all dates back to 1929, when a floatplane pilot named William Wincapaw started literally dropping sacks of presents from the sky onto the grounds of coastal beacons so that the families of lighthouse keepers could have gifts and supplies for the holidays.
So he figured it was a pretty lonely existence out there at Christmas, and he wanted to go out and give them packages of coffee, candy, magazines, books, and flew over on Christmas Day.
When lighthouses became automated, the tradition changed but remained just as special. Now, 82 years later, Flying Santa honors the families of Coast Guard personnel, our current heroes of the waters.
They're out there doing their job every day, and this is our way of saying thanks for what they do.
This modern-day Flying Santa visits 33 lighthouses and Coast Guard stations in 3 days, delivering presents to more than 700 children from Maine to New York.
Just a great appreciation that they recognize us and everything, and all the kids, and you know, all of us out here to coming together as, you know, one big family.
And the children's faces clearly show the magic of the season.
He is so excited. Like, now he believes in Santa Claus. Something he'll never forget.
Feeling like it's cool and awesome.
For goodness sake, don't feel bad for Rudolph and Prancer.
No, the reindeer rest up for Christmas, so we don't want to wear them out.
Santa is full of energy as his whirlybird slowly lifts off, bound for many more merry moments. A beautiful nautical tradition full of volunteerism, gratitude, and good cheer. The perfect sentiments for Christmas time.
You know, there's nothing commercial about it. I mean, we're here doing our job as a gesture of appreciation for what the Coast Guard does, and we're happy to do it.
That's Mommy Minute.
Merry Christmas!
Sarah Cody, Fox, Connecticut.
All right, I'm back, and I'm always, when I come out of screen sharing, I'm always relieved to see there are still some people here. I can't see anybody while I'm sharing my screen. So anyway, thank you for your kind attention through that. And at this point, Dolly, if I could ask you to maybe share a little bit of your memories of what was it like. You went, first of all, you first flew with your dad as the Flying Santa when you were how old?
I think before a year old. I know
Okay.
it was because I was born in March and it was the next year.
And you remember that really well, of course.
Oh, yes, very well.
So what
And
was it like growing up and being part of the Flying Santa flights?
it was pretty special. For some reason, I always knew that my dad was not Santa. He was the Flying Santa. So there was no problem that way. And it was all year we would plan for the Flying Santa. And then in December, our ping pong table would become Santa's workshop. And we'd have cigars, cigarettes when they were good for you. Lollipops, chewing gum, pens and pencils, sunglasses, balloons, rubber balls, paperback books, Gillette razor blades, because Gillette was always a big sponsor, sometimes puzzles or a doll or other toy, and always a copy of my dad's latest book. And that would be in different positions on the ping pong table.
Yeah.
And then we'd wrap each thing in newspaper and then put Excelsior, which was a kind of like a hay-like substance that would pad the package and then make it also buoyant if there was a problem.
Yeah.
And then wrap it in brown wrapping paper with a tie it, and then write on it S for stag, D for doll. Maybe if there was something for a dog, that was written on there too. And they always, as you said, had a self-addressed stamped postcard that we had written, we have received your package, and then there would be a part in the bottom for the Coast Guard station or the lighthouse to write who had received it. And because of that, he could claim something like 94% accuracy for all those years that he did it.
Yeah.
So that was always something to think about. He was planning for that throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I was dreading it throughout the year because it was the roughest, most horrible flight than you can imagine. It was usually a 5-seat plane. There'd be the pilot and then maybe a photographer. My dad would be behind the pilot sometimes, and then my mother, and then I'd be in the back with all these packages packed all around me. And it was so rough, you have no idea. So when many, many years later, I got asked to be an elf by Brian, I said yes, but I was very nervous. Because I had no idea what a helicopter would be, a helicopter ride. And as you mentioned, Evan was the pilot. And evidently, I don't remember this, but he does, that I said to him afterwards, it was like a magic carpet ride. It was so different. So wonderful.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what I got to do. But seeing all the people, we couldn't interact the way you can now with a helicopter because we were up in a plane. And although we would land at some airports and then we would see kids and they would be happy, it's so much different now, and it's just such a wonderful event.
Yeah.
It's such a good thing that you and that Brian and that the Friends of Flying Santa does.
Well, you're part of all that. You're still very much part of the tradition. And I'll second what you said about planes versus helicopters, because I love flying in helicopters. The only times I've ever been airsick have been in small planes, a couple of times. It's night and day.
They're going up and down and around and circling and making sure that they got the package and letting them know you're coming. Yeah. The helicopters are good.
Yeah, and there's something about looking through a viewfinder of a camera when you're flying in a plane. Certainly didn't agree with me. I know that. But just one other thing about the stuff they included in the packages. I always love the story that one year some company donated a whole bunch of boxes of ribbon candy.
Ribbon candy. Yeah.
To be dropped out of a plane.
Right. They were handed out at Lighthouse at the stops at the airport rather than being dropped from a plane.
Oh, I thought some of them were actually dropped.
Well, they may have been, but I mean, really.
Yeah. Ended up being powdered ribbon candy, maybe, if it was dropped.
Is there still such a thing as ribbon candy?
I think I read not too long ago in the last couple of years that the last company that was making ribbon candy stopped making it. So.
Well, Brian, you can't have it. Sorry.
It's extinct now. Maybe Friends of Flying Santa should make ribbon candy as a fundraiser. I don't know. But anyway, thank you, Dolly. Thank you so much for sharing your memories. Bill Wincapaw the third, I want to certainly give you an opportunity if you'd like to say anything more about your family's involvement. Of course, your grandfather passed away in 46, or no, wait a minute. Yeah, 46, right? So that's 76 years ago.
47, I think it was 47. 46, you're right. Wait a minute. Yeah, you're right. 46.
46, yeah, because the snow flight where he dropped a wreath in it was in 47. Yeah. So whoops, everybody just shift around. There you are. You shifted around on my screen there. So obviously you're not 80 or 90 years old, so you don't remember your family's involvement with the flights. But it's just such a neat legacy. And I'm just wondering if you have any comments about all that.
Oh, just it's tradition still going on today because of people like the Snows and the Bryans, the Friends of the Flying Santa, all the volunteers. It's just amazing tradition that's just keeps rolling with great people, dedicated people. And
yes,
just, yeah, that's the amazing thing about it. All these years later.
Yes, and I know Brian would agree with me that it's so nice to have you and Dolly and other members of the families involved in any way. It's somebody's applauding that, and I join in that applause. It's just wonderful. It's a continuation. It's just it's perfect having you involved. So, and thank you for being here tonight too.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And I want to give Sally, if you have anything you might want to add about your involvement with Flying Santa. You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you'd like to say, please do.
I was the elf in 2002, and then in 2003, I was appointed the keeper of Boston Light. Thank you to Captain May, Dan May, that's on here tonight as well. So thank you, Dan. I had no idea that I'd still 19 years later still be there. And Flying Santa has given gifts to us, landed on the island, and those are my favorite memories as the keeper of Boston Light. And so I'm so grateful. And that's a wonderful, wonderful program. When I've been to different Coast Guard stations, when the children were getting their gifts, it's, that wide-eyed excitement. So I think it's wonderful that the program is continuing to go.
I completely agree. Thank you, Sally. And Dan, I want to give you another opportunity if you want to add anything about your personal experience with Flying Santa.
Well, thanks, Jeremy, and great job with the presentation tonight. I've seen this many times, but every time I see it, it's even better than you do before. So fantastic job, Jeremy.
Thank you.
As you always do. But I think what makes this so great, it's the joy, as we've heard from everyone tonight. It's the joy of those that are the recipients, and it transcends genders. Generations of folks. My grandchildren are going to participate this year. So there you go, from the 1920s to the 2020. It's amazing story. And Sally, thanks for your kind words as well. I'll never forget the year I flew with Brian. It was absolutely freezing that day. I was frozen in the back of that helicopter. Evan Weil was the pilot that year, but we landed at Boston Light just to take a little break. And like a great keeper, Sally had fresh coffee, hot tea, and fresh baked cookies.
I figured there were cookies. There are always cookies where Sally's involved.
That made the entire trip worthwhile. So thank you, Sally, and thanks to everybody for participating tonight. It's just great to see all the familiar faces. And again, Jeremy, thanks for keeping the story going.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate that. And at this point, let me get back to Brian here. Brian, I talked a little bit about the pilots in the presentation, but maybe you'd like to add something about what a central role that the pilots and helicopter companies play in this tradition.
Well, we'd be driving to all the locations if it wasn't for the pilots. So, they are integral. Just going back in the 32 years I've been doing it. I've flown with a lot of great pilots. We haven't had a bad one in the bunch. Just patient, cheerful, accommodating, generous, and we've been extremely fortunate. When I first started, we were chartering some of the flights, and it was very expensive. and the toys weren't, of the best value, but since we get all the helicopters donated, we put all the money that we raise into purchasing the gifts for the Coast Guard kids. So it's just been a tremendous improvement in what we can give to the kids and how much they like it. But you look at pilots like Evan Weil, who started in 2002, and he doesn't fly anymore, but he still looks out for us. He's stepped up and found helicopter sponsors to fill in. But we've got, going back to Ray Todd and Art Kajikian, Dale Hardy, and then our current pilots, Wes Veerkart. You've got Stuart Auerbach, who's one of our newest pilots, and then you've got Jeff Hubbard and Monica Snow, and then Scott Hanula with JVI helicopters, and they say it's their best day of flying. They have a blast with it. They're very well received. They're always interested in showing off the helicopters, and it's just great to be able to do this and have the participation of these helicopter companies and pilots that really enjoy doing it, and they get why we're doing it, and how much we should be showing appreciation and recognition to the Coast Guard fans.
Right. I just thought of something that I should mention. Some of you know I do a podcast for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. It's called Lighthearted, 2 words, meaning people have lighthouses in their hearts. And several of you, there are a bunch of people here who have been on the podcast. Brian has been on it a couple of times. We did one whole show about the Flying Santa, and Dolly has been on it. I'm going to say, well, I know at least twice, or has it been maybe 3 times? But we did a show about your Project Gurnet and Bug Lights, but we did a separate show about your memories of the Flying Santa, and about your dad in general too. And Sally, I did 2 parts 1 and 2 with you, and Flying Santa was one of many subjects covered. Dan May was also divided into 2 parts because there was so much to talk about. That was not that long ago. It was great having you on, Dan. Jen Bogard from Plum Island Light was on not too long ago. We did a show on Plum Island Light, Newburyport, and Mia Sertich, who I think is still here somewhere. There she is, waving to me. The executive director at Montauk Light, New York, was on. I think several months or so ago. And I'm sure those are the people I can see on my screen right now who've been on the. Oh, Michelle Miroff from there you are, yeah, from Huntington Harbor Lighthouse has been on. And I know I'm forgetting people, but I just want to mention that if you want to hear more about all this and listen to more of these people's their great stories and everything, just find the podcast Lighthearted. You can Google it or go to the U.S. Lighthouse Society website. They're on there, or use a podcast app and search for Light Space Hearted, 2 words. You can find it very easily. So Brian, let me ask you another question here. You've been involved again for how many years with the Flying Santa program?
32 years.
32 years. And you've been the president of Friends of Flying Santa for how long?
Oh, forever.
Yeah, I'm sure it feels like it. You do so much work. I mean, it's just you're Santa and all those elves and reindeer and everything else combined. I know the pilots and the Santas and everything are important too, but you do so much. I'm wondering, I think I know the answer to why you do it, but what does keep you going? What's been your favorite part of your involvement with all this?
Well, it's just the reaction of the Coast Guard crews and their families. The adults are as excited as the kids. I think sometimes more excited. And we get feedback. We get it on the day of the flight. We get it afterwards. We get it at Coast Guard change of command ceremonies in June or July, and they just tell us how much they look forward to it. It's a huge morale event. All the families from the units come together, and the kids love it. And it's for New England and Long Island, New York, and when they transfer out of the area, they do miss it, but when they transfer back, they look forward to connecting with Flying Santa again. And so it's just that reaction that they appreciate what we're doing for them, and we do it in appreciation for what they do. And it's just fun because I all the work that I put in, I get to see the results. I get to see firsthand the reaction of the kids and the parents, and some of them it's their first visit with Santa, and they're some of them take well to it and some of them don't, but it's that reaction of their first time seeing Santa, and the families really get a kick out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I got to fly along in 2012 on the Massachusetts flight, and the thing I learned that day is how amazing it is. I mean, in so many ways, it was just absolutely amazing experience, but also kind of grueling. And this, you know, we left before dawn. You get back after sunset. It's a really, really long day. And all I was doing was sitting in the back of the helicopter and getting in and out of the stops and taking some pictures and videos. You and Santa and the pilot were doing all the work, but I was exhausted by the end of the day. So it really gave me an appreciation for the hard work that goes into it, for sure. So
you use a lot of different muscles getting in and out of helicopters.
you do. Yeah, my back was killing me by the end of the day. But let me ask you, I've got a couple more questions for you. You kind of answered already, but why do you think why does this whole tradition why does it need to continue? Why do we still need it?
The same reason why it was started. You know, Bill Wincapaw started to show appreciation to the lighthouse keepers and the lifeboat crews, and just to show them that people are thinking about them around the holidays, and you know, there's still Coast Guard crews out there doing their jobs, and so that's what we're doing. We're showing appreciation for what they do, for the same reasons that Bill Wincapaw and Edward Rowe Snow did it. So yeah, there's no reason to stop. As long as there's a Coast Guard out there, we'll still do it.
Right. Let me ask you, how can people help? If people want to donate, obviously it takes some money to keep this going. But besides donating, are there other ways?
No, it's the finances are the biggest issue. Over 90% of what we spend is on the gifts for the kids, and you know, we're fortunate that the helicopter services are donated presently. But this year alone, the toys are probably up 50% over last year. So that's a huge expense, and you know, we've got a reputation for giving out good gifts. We don't want to cut back and disappoint kids. So that's the main issue, is just donating. You know, we try to do fundraising. We haven't been able to do cruises the past few years, but we're going to get back into that next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's every year we're scraping every dollar to make the program happen. So yeah, if you want to support the program, we're happy to receive donations, and you can do that on our website. You can print out a form to mail in, or you can pay by credit card or PayPal.
Yeah, I'm showing the website here. Let me see if I can enter full screen. Here we go. So here's the website. You can see it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a lot on the website, including history of the flights under About. You can go to the history page. It's got a lot of the information and photos I showed you tonight, but there's more on there too. And there's a donate button right on the front page. There's also an Amazon Smile button. So if you click on this and then go to Amazon and buy something, Flying Santa, Friends of Flying Santa benefits from that. And there are photos, see photos and videos in the 2021 flights. You can click on that and see galleries of photos from all the stops. There's stuff about the pilots and the aircraft, various aircraft over the years. And there's a little gift shop where you can buy the children's book I mentioned earlier, Love from the Sky, the story of Simond and the Flying Santa, by our friend Angeli Perro, illustrated by our friend Heidi Farrow. And you can also buy the book Everyday Heroes, True Story of a Lighthouse Family, about Simond's life, early life at lighthouses. And you can buy Flying Santa plush animals. You want to say something about those, Brian?
Sure. Yeah, this year's animal is a gray husky, and we have plenty of those available for purchase. And then we also have from past years, we've got the 2020 goats, and I believe we've got some 2019 beavers, 2018 moose. But yeah, they've been pretty popular. We've been dealing with a Canadian company since 2009, and the kids love them. They collect them, and there's photos of them around their tree or on their mantle. And see, you've got the beaver from 2009.
Yeah. 2019. Yeah. You have the husky right there, right? The new one, Brian?
Yep, right here. So,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, you're looking at, when we do this on a good year, non-COVID, we've got close to 1,200 Coast Guard kids that we have to get gifts for. So it's a big task, and we don't want to disappoint them because we're there when they receive the gifts. So we see the reaction, and learning from years ago that a disappointed kid is not something you want to see on these flights. So you know, they're excited about Santa, they're excited about the helicopter, and excited about getting a gift. It doesn't have to be the best gift in the world, but it's just something neat that they can play around with. And we get feedback from some of the parents that, you know, the kids still play with it, or they still have the stuffed animal. And so it's we hear that, we know we got our job done, right? But this year, for example, we've got a remote control spider.
Oh wow!
The big helicopter books, which are really popular. And we've got the whole slew of remote control cars and stuffed animals and remote control helicopters. So a lot of effort goes into finding decent toys. We don't just go out and buy some coloring books and crayons. It's kind of a challenge to make sure we get something the kids like. And we'll all be spending the next few weeks tagging and bagging and stocking Santa's bag and sending them out to the distribution points before we pick them up with the helicopter.
Right. So how many stops this year and how many kids?
We've got over 30 stops, 100 plus Coast Guard units, 4 days of flights, 6 states, and what do we got? I think well over 1,000 kids. The numbers were down during COVID, but we're hoping they're bouncing back this year.
Right. But even you never missed a year, right? Even in the middle of COVID, they were done you observing certain rules, distancing and everything, but it still happened. Right?
Yeah, we came up with a plan first year of COVID with the first district, and it was a drive up. You know, we landed in the helicopter and the family stayed in their cars, and we had a 6-foot table, and they would drive up to the end of the table, and Santa would slide down the bag of gifts, and the kids were hanging out of the sunroof and the windows and holding up signs, and the families were really appreciative because so much had been canceled, all the schools, all the sports events, and they thought Flying Santa would be canceled too. But we found a way with the Coast Guard to make it work, and they really enjoyed it. It was still a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that it happened. So at this point, we've been on here for about an hour and a half, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I'm wondering if people might have questions or comments. I'd like to open it up.
Say something real quick, Jeremy, just to people.
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
Down in Hyannis, they've relocated the Mass Air and Space Museum to Main Street in Hyannis, and they're doing another exhibit this year on the Flying Santa program.
Oh.
So they have some of our memorabilia, a lot of photographs. They've got the special Edward Rowe Snow airplane door. But yeah, if you get a chance, I think they're open Thursday through Sunday, and it's Main Street in Hyannis, and it's the Mass Air and Space Museum. So
cool.
Check that out.
Well, I didn't know about that. That's great. Good to hear. Yeah, the Hull Life Museum in the past has had an exhibit, and of course the Maine Lighthouse Museum has a permanent exhibit. And we're always discussing the more Flying Santa exhibits, the better. So let's see if people want to ask any questions in the chat, you can do it. That's one way you can do it. I'm skimming through the chat. There's a lot of comments. Oh, Kathy Mastico, my friend who has written a wonderful new book that I happen to have right next to me here. Can you see the lighthouse at Point San Luis? Whoops, that's the magic of Zoom. I was lucky enough to be involved in the editing of this book for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. It's just being published now by the U.S. Lighthouse Society. And Kathy Mastico, who wrote this, is here tonight. And she posted in the chat on December 21st, 1953, the Flying Santa dropped gifts at the Point San Luis, California light station. The 5 Coast Guardsmen manning the light station were each dropped a package containing razor blades, cigars, cigarettes, and books. So that's one of the years Edward Rowe Snow flew to the West Coast, 1953. I don't know how many times he did that. It wasn't a lot, but unmute yourself, Dolly.
Twice anyway, I'm pretty sure.
Uh-huh. Well, that's cool. Thank you, Kathy, for posting that. And thank you for all the kind words and the comments in the chat. I'm skimming through to see if there's any questions. What was the site to get the books, etc.? Of course, we I showed that eventually, and the address is, never said the address, flyingsanta.org. That's pretty easy. flyingsanta.org, the website for the merchandise and donations and the history and pictures and all kinds of good stuff. Yes, I hope so. Jen, you posted, yes, I hope so. Is it too late for this year? Too late for what? I'm not sure what that was referring to at the time.
A visit from Flying Santa.
Oh, yeah, I think it's too late for Plum Island for this year. Something maybe to be discussed going forward. But the
Do
schedule.
we sign up on the website, or is it
I'm sorry, say that again.
Well, did I freeze?
No. I was talking over you, so I missed the beginning of what you said.
Do we sign up on the website, or if our lighthouse is interested, how do we?
You can talk to Brian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
primary mission for us now is the Coast Guard units, and so we've got a few civilian stops, but it's kind of difficult because we've increased the program so much. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we only had about 600 Coast Guard kids, 500 Coast Guard kids, but we've included every Coast Guard unit from Maine to Long Island, New York. So our schedule is filled up. So, you can talk to me, send me an email, give me a call, but yeah, it's really tight right now with our schedule, because basically we're getting up at 3 a.m. and taking off well before sunrise, and we're covering a lot of ground. So we only fly on the weekends because the kids are in school during the weekdays, and it's a full schedule. We have to keep backup dates for the flights, obviously New England, and we do use them. But yeah, it's a tight schedule right now, but we can always keep you in mind if anything changes. But our primary mission has been with the Coast Guard families, and but we do appreciate what folks are doing with the lighthouses, and we do accommodate some of them that historically have been involved. Goat Island going back to the 90s, and Pembroke Point, and Situate Light. But yeah, so it's one of those things where it doesn't hurt to ask, and we'll get you on our agenda, and if we can ever do anything, we'll figure out a way. So
yeah, and you do the Newburyport Coast Guard Station, so that's near Plum Island.
Yeah, we used to land at Plum Island because there was a power station right next to the Coast Guard station that had high tension wires that we didn't want to get anyone near. But when they took that down, we were now able to land at the Coast Guard station at Merrimack River. But we landed a number of times out at Plum Island Light, and it was cold and snowy and windy, and but it was a beautiful spot.
Yeah.
I remember when I was little, I was there. So.
Oh, neat.
Makes us feel old, Jeremy.
Yeah. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, we'll it's one of those things where we can put it on our notes and see what we can do, but just to let you know what the situation is. It's right now, it's a really full schedule, but you never know what can happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. Right. Kim made an interesting comment in the chat. On one of the photos, people sitting on top of a plane, there's a rope held by Edward Rowe Snow, and it's wrapped around the nose of the plane. What is it? It looks like he's holding the reins. Yeah. And I just, as you were talking, I found the picture, and I'll go back into share screen so I can show the picture. And Brian or Bill, maybe you.
1963. That was an Aztec, Piper Aztec, and they would do that with some of the photos. They would kind of do some cute little posing, and the plane would be the reindeer, and he's controlling the rope. So that's kind of why they did that.
Holding the reins. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and it shows how observant I am, because I never really give it much thought. But
however, we actually got inside the plane to fly.
Yes.
That year.
Right. You didn't actually sit on the wing.
No.
That would have been even more
exciting.
Problematic in various ways.
When Bill Wincapaw flew open cockpit off the coast of Maine, yeah. That was a challenge.
Yeah. I've been up in helicopters a number of times with the door taken off for photography. That was little spooky, but fun. But I don't know about no cockpit on a plane. I don't want to, I think I
Well,
want
if
to
you
do
look
that.
at the classic picture of Bill Wincapaw, he's got the leather flight helmet on and the goggles, and they made good use of those on some of those Santa flights because they were out in some pretty cold weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions. I think rather than, if you want to post in the chat a question, or if you want to say in the chat that you want to speak, please go ahead and do that. But I think it might, rather than have everybody unmute themselves at once, it's probably best to post in the chat. But I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. I'm seeing a lot of nice comments, and I really appreciate that. So we are coming up on an hour and 3/4 in this event, and I don't want to overstay our welcome. I really appreciate everybody attending tonight, and I hope you will check out the website. And it's a cliche to say it, but it's always true that for something like this, whether it's a $5 donation or whatever it might be, every penny is important. But I'm glad a lot of you are saying you enjoyed the program. I'm glad you did. I really appreciate people taking part. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and all those things. And again, I hope nobody's caught in 100 inches of snow. If you are, those people probably aren't with us tonight. Brian, you want to say something?
A quick thing, if anyone that wants to get a sense of one of the Flying Santa visits, there are a couple that are open to the public. We are going to the Hull Life Saving Museum on December 10th, and we're also going to be landing at Pembroke Point Light on November 26th. And those are two places that are open to the public, and you can see Santa come in with the helicopter. We don't do gifts, we do candy canes, but we get some good turnouts. There's probably about 300 plus people that show up at Pembroke Point, and anywhere from 75 to 100 that show up at the Hull Life Saving Museum. But if you want to get a sense of the Flying Santa, you could turn out at some of those locations.
Yeah.
You might want to tell them about what time.
Do you know what time offhand?
Sure. Let me just jump to my notes here.
And Jeremy, did you want me to finish Simon's letter?
Yes, I do. And I'm so glad you said that, because I knew there was something. What am I supposed to be? I should have looked back at my notes because it's on there. So let's let Brian find that. But if you want to, we do want to hear. I think a good place to end this is another statement from Simond, and Dolly's going to read that in a moment. Did you find the times, Brian?
Yeah. So it's they're actually both 12:25. 12:25 on November 26th, the Saturday, and 12:25 on Saturday, December 10th.
And the 10th is at the Hull Life Saving Museum. You need to tell them where it's going to be.
Yes.
So one more time, the first one is at Pembroke Point Lighthouse.
On Saturday, November 26th at 1:25 p.m.
No,
12:25.
12:25.
I'm
You
sorry.
said-
Yeah, I'm looking at, I've got 27 screens open in front of me, so sorry. Give me a second here. All right, so Pembroke Point Light, Saturday, November 26th at 12:25 p.m. And then on Saturday, December 10th, the Hull Life Saving Museum at 12:25 p.m.
I hope some people can make the one or both of those. It's so much fun being there.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. So Dolly, would you like to bring our presentation to a suitable close with another message from our friend
Right.
Simon?
And remember, this is from Simond. And she was talking about my dad, and she says, "What a wonderful man, not just to me, but to all the Lighthouse and all the Coast Guard kids, like forever since then. Let me reassure you, I still believe in Santa Claus. In my dreams, though, my Santa flies in a plane or a helicopter. The Flying Santa gave me love and a lifetime of Christmases to be remembered. That was the principle of the Flying Santa program, to give a lighthouse or Coast Guard child a lifetime of Christmas and to let them know they are special. Seaman says, "Merry Christmas, everyone, and thank you everyone in our Flying Santa program." Yes.
Thank you, Dolly. That's perfect. I can't top that. The only thing I want to add is that if people want to see this again or tell friends about it, it will be posted on the U.S. Lighthouse Society Facebook page, YouTube channel, on the YouTube channel within a couple of days. It will be on there. So watch for that. So again, thank you all so much.
Thank
Happy
you,
Thanksgiving.
Jeremy. Thank
Happy
you,
holidays.
As always, you step up and do a great job for all this, and we appreciate it. You're a true professional, and you never tell a boring story. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you, Jeremy.